We'll have some key words and things like that we'll be looking at. But through really the rest of chapter 1, I don't have a whole lot that I have marked in little notes and things like that as it just kind of finishes up. There is a lot to talk about, though, as we look and see what's happening here in these last few verses. So I think we kind of were ending here in our last class at chapter 1 and verse 39. We are... Jesus he's been in Capernaum, and at this point, because of some of the amazing things that Jesus has done, Jesus has gone out to get away from people, to spend time in prayer. He tells his disciples, we need to go elsewhere. We need to go to the other cities. Verse 38, so that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for. We've emphasized that verse a lot over the last few weeks because of the main purpose of why Jesus came. He came to preach. He came to teach. He came to help people to understand what God's plan really is all about. And so in verse 39 it says, and he went through into their synagogues throughout all Galilee, preaching and casting out demons. So our key word in verse 39 is preaching. Somebody was asking me the other day about keywords. They're like, some of these keywords, it doesn't seem like they're that significant necessarily. And not every single time they're used, it might not be the most significant word that's there. I mark all of them as I go through because I want to make sure that I don't miss something that might be significant. One of our key words is the word man, anthropos in the Greek. And sometimes when you're going through a text, it just talks about, and a man with a withered hand. It's not really that significant of a word right there. However, when you begin to look at the word man, later on in the gospel, it begins to describe Jesus as the Son of Man. And then that same word is going to be very significant. And so I do mark it everywhere just so that when I'm looking for key words, I can go back and find them. But if you kind of been wondering, it's like, well, is that really that important to mark? You don't have to. If you don't, that's not really a big deal right there. Don't worry about it. But I do just for my own kind of OCD to make sure I don't forget one, miss one. So, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. No, they're ones that these keywords are based off of the most commonly used words in the text. And then some of them aren't as common. I think there's a few that are only used maybe like 6 or 8 times, but those are very significant words. But there are some that are used as many as 30, I think there may be 1 or 2 that's over 40 times that a word's used through the Gospel of Mark. It's done by generating a list. You can do it through different software, Bible software, if you don't want to take weeks of looking through it yourself. And they'll just generate lists of the most common words used in a book. And those usually become some of the most significant words. I mean, obviously there's some variants. We're not going to look up the word and call that a key word. But sometimes it is. Sometimes the word and can be a key word. It can be very significant. But so that's where those words come from. That's where that list is generated from. Jesus was focusing here on, he's focusing on the spiritual centers. He's going into the synagogues. And he's teaching and preaching in the synagogues. This is a lesson that the Apostle Paul's going to learn. When we see the ministry of the Apostle Paul, he's going to go into the synagogues because that's where the people who are religious people, that's where they gather. And so finding the people who are going to be the most receptive is a great tactic that we see in the Bible. There are a lot of missionaries. There's a lot of work that's done in this, and it depends on where in the world you're going to determine what areas might be the most receptive areas to go to. But missionaries spend a lot of time doing research and where will be the best place for me to go. And there's a lot of times the focus is on the big cities. There's more people there, and so the thought is with the more population, I just have more I'm able to do with more people quicker, and it makes sense because there's more people than in smaller areas. But where do you usually find the people who are more receptive to spiritual conversations? I've found it's usually more rural communities, not necessarily the big cities. The big cities need evangelists be evangelized as well. And it kind of struck me. I never even thought about this until I was in Australia, when I was in Tasmania. And we were in mainly the big cities for the most part, Hobart and Launceston and Devonport. But it was when we're driving between those, we would stop in these little towns. And I would notice they were vacant, run-down churches. And they were Anglican, the Church of England, because when England was the one that was owned Australia, the Church of England was the only religion that would have been allowed. And so, but there are still these old buildings that weeds are growing up all around everything. And I asked them, I said, what, do they use these? Said, oh yeah. He said, maybe twice or three times a year, a priest will come into the area and hold some kind of a service or a mass, and so the people can get their religious fill. And it just kind of hit me. It's like, why are we not here? These people, they were the nicest people, the people in those communities. They were friendly. They would talk to you about anything. And it just kind of, why are we not planting churches in some of these small towns, in some of these places as well? And of course, our missionaries we don't have manpower. We've got churches that we're already working with, and we need more people to be working to be able to do something like that. But Jesus gives us a good example in things like this. So we see the Apostle Paul go to where the people are going to be the most receptive at first, and work from there. And that's going into a synagogue where the Jews are, and so it continues. It says he's doing what he has been doing. He's casting out demons. He's going to be healing people. And that's what we see beginning in verse 40. In verse 40 says not a lot, it reads, and a leper came to Jesus, beseeching him and falling on his knees before him and saying, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Okay? Key word, actually, it's not, I don't think we have it on our list. This is the first time that we see the word thelo. Remember when we did our introductory material? I think it's on page 8 of the introductory material, is a whole listing of the times that the word thelo, the Greek word for want or will, is used. This is a very significant term. I would say add it to the keyword list. I'm going to be pointing this out as we go through its significance. And so this idea that is mentioned here, where the man simply asked Jesus, if you are willing. So what he's asking Jesus is he's saying, if you really want to. And the way it describes here, how does the leper respond to Jesus? How does it describe him responding to him when he sees him? He beseeches him. What does beseech mean? I mean, that's a word that we use every day, isn't it? Okay, implore or beg. We don't usually use that word much anymore. Plead, right. So I'm pleading with you. Okay, that's a good point. Let's think about this man himself and what he would have been going through, his life at this point. Here's a man with leprosy. And as a man with leprosy, what does his life look like? He's a Jew. Okay, he's an outcast. What else? What's that? He's isolated. Okay. What else do we know about lepers and also concerning, okay, it's incurable, miserable. What is leprosy? It sores. Is it a bacteria? Is it that, what's that? Okay. It's a bacteria that simply eats at the flesh. And it's painful, it's agonizing, it's ugly. It's a disgusting thing to see as it advances. And so there are a lot of things that are said about leprosy, especially in the Old Testament. And so this life that he has, how much courage did it take for this man to come to Jesus at this point? Just think about it. I mean, is Jesus just out here all by himself at this point in his ministry? What have we been reading? It's crowds and multitudes of people. Jesus tried to get away to go pray by himself, and his disciples come to him and say, "But everybody's looking for you." And so everywhere Jesus goes, there are these crowds and just multitudes of people that are around him. Well, a leper isn't supposed to be near any of these people. He's commanded by God in the Old Testament to put his hand on his mustache and say, "Unclean, unclean." In other words, try that, moms, with your kids. Say, when you sneeze, put your hand on your mustache. That's what God was saying. Cover your mouth and say unclean. You've got to announce it so that people can go to the other side of the street and stay away from you, because it's very contagious. And so as this man, again, this guy would have had to have worked his way through this crowd to be able to get to Jesus. Although seeing him coming, that crowd might have parted. But it would have taken some courage for a guy like this in this state to come and get this close to Jesus. And okay, there's a lot of faith that's here that we see, at least by what he's saying. He's beseeching Jesus. He's begging him. It says he falls on his knees. What does that demonstrate about this man? What does this man recognize about Jesus? What's that? Authority. That's been one of our key words. The authority of Jesus is beginning to be seen more and more. And here is just an example of someone who is demonstrating he recognizes that this man that's here, he has some kind of authority over me. If you are willing, if you want to, then I know that you can heal me. I know that you can do this. And he drops to his knees. And so this willingness is something, again, the word is used again in verse 41 in Jesus' response. Jesus' response there, I think I do mark, yeah, the word willing. Remember, that's that word thelo. In verse 41, it says, moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Okay? Key word are willing and immediately. Both of those are there. Yep. And so, I don't know why. I'm so used to looking. I've got one on the back wall now, I can see. It's just a habit now. As he approaches Jesus, imagine what the gasp of the crowd must have been like. Because what does it say that Jesus does with this man? He touched him. You don't touch a leper. As a matter of fact, the law commanded not to touch a leper. And some, well, Jesus broke the law of Moses. No, because as soon as Jesus touched him, he wasn't a leper anymore. And so as we see this amazing thing, all these people, they knew what lepers were. They were terrified of lepers. They cast them out into their own leper colonies. They'd live in the hills and in caves and away from population. They didn't want anything to do with them. And here Jesus reaches out and he touches this man. And immediately he was cleansed. And that's something that's going to be a repetition all the way through the Gospel of Mark. When Jesus performs these miracles, it's something that happens immediately. His flesh has been rotting and turning white and oozing, and then in an instant, it's completely gone. His skin is perfect. And that miraculous power that Jesus had to be able to do that, what would your reaction be if you witnessed something like that with your own eyes? Just imagine the people that are standing around that knew what this disease was, and they saw this take place. Verse 43, it says, "And he sternly warned him and immediately sent him away. And he said to him, 'See that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded as a testimony to them.'" Okay? As a testimony to them. As a testimony to who? The priest. Okay? Now this is a command. We got keyword here is what? Oh, did I already mark it? It's not working. I guess in verse 43 we have immediately. Then I write Leviticus 13 and 14 here next to this, because if you want to go back and look at the old law of what the law commanded concerning Leviticus, or concerning leprosy, then this is the main passage that you would go to. It gives all of the commands of what it would require someone to, if you think that you might have leprosy, you had to go to the priest and let the priest look at your skin. And the priest, he wasn't a doctor, but he was one that knew how to determine the disease. And if you had leprosy, then there are steps that you had to be taken. There had to be steps that had to be taken with things in your home that had to be cleansed. And what you had to do, your lifestyle automatically changes. Then if you somehow are able to beat this disease, obviously it happened. Just because you got leprosy didn't necessarily mean you would die of leprosy, because in the old law, God talks about that if you have been cleansed of this disease, if it's gone, then you have to go back to the priest and show him your skin and get the approval that, yes, officially you've been healed of the disease. And then there are instructions that must be done in order to continue to live your life amongst the regular population again. Part of that was offering an offering to God, basically in the sense of thanking God for the blessing of being able to get through this disease and live your life as normal. And so this is a great example to show that Jesus was very in tune with the law of Moses. Jesus, he wanted to make sure he just healed this man. And of all people, Jesus could have been the one to say, you know what, you're good. I healed you. You are perfectly clean. As a matter of fact, you're more clean than you were probably before you got leprosy. And he could have said, you're good. Don't worry about it. But Jesus understood the law of Moses required that he go to the priest and that he show himself. And so Jesus wanted to make sure that the law was obeyed. And this is going to... You've been talking several times about the kingdom not yet Sure. Yeah, it's in everything that we see with Jesus, the reign and the rule of God, the reign and the rule, the standards of God being in place. And it changed over time how God reigned over his people. But the fact of God's reign and his authority in everything is always there. And so this is going to be a great challenge for the scribes and the Pharisees as we continue on through the Gospel of Mark. The fact that Jesus does everything right. That when they challenge Jesus, that Jesus' response many times is something along the line of, well, what did Moses say? And we have multiple times. I didn't mark these down. If you want to, you can. In chapter 7, verse 10, chapter 10, verse 19, chapter 12, verses 19 and verse 26. They're all places where we see these types of questions come up where Jesus points to the law of Moses. What did Moses write? What did he say? And so Jesus is the one that they are looking to as having such tremendous authority, but yet Jesus continues to point back to the law. The law really has authority. Now, it's not going to be until after the resurrection, Jesus' resurrection, that Jesus is then going to say, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. And so they see the authority, they see the power of God that's working through Jesus right now. Jesus continues to point back to what does the law say, and it gives more. It just boosts the credentials of Jesus, of who he is and what he was doing. Jesus in Matthew 5, I didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill them. And so he's not teaching as one who has the authority to overturn the law. And so it's amazing. Now, Jesus tells the man not to go tell anybody. What would you do? You have a disease that most likely is going to be the disease that takes your life, most likely. You have been outcast from your family. You haven't been able to go to the marketplace. You haven't been able to worship in the synagogue. You are a complete outcast in this society. And now all of a sudden you're not. You just met the man that took all of that away. And you're perfect again. What would you do? I think we would do exactly what he did. Jesus told him not to. And we see why in the next few verses, why I think Jesus didn't want him to. But this is a man who is excited about the cleansing that he just received. And I think we can, I see this a lot through these things that we see in the life of Jesus, where the physical healings and the physical cleansings and those things that take place, I think we can look at those and apply them to the spiritual healings that also take place. I mean, I'm talking about the cleansing of sin. Are you as overwhelmed with your cleansing of sin that you can't help yourself but to go out and proclaim it freely to everyone that you know? Do we respond the same way that this man did from a physical cleansing? Is that the way we respond with the spiritual cleansing that we've received? I think I find myself sometimes becoming kind of apathetic. I'm used to it. I'm used to my Christian life. And I lose that sense of immediacy and the need to share with others what just happened. And if it was a disease, if it was any disease that any one of us has, and you think whatever ailment you're struggling with right now, all of us have at least one of some kind. and if immediately it was gone, or you found that secret that took it away, what would you be spending the next month doing? You'd be selling that as hard as you could to other people that you knew had the same issue. Well, everybody has the same issue. Everybody has a sin problem. And I heard a preacher one time. Young man was baptized, was excited. And the preacher told him, you need to settle down. You probably need to keep your mouth closed concerning your family, and because you never know, they probably aren't going to believe like you believe, and I don't want them to discourage you. And just to let you know. And when I heard that, what is he doing? This is the one moment in a person's life when they really understand what has just happened for the first time ever, and they want to go out and share that with as many people as they possibly can. Now, will they be rejected by people that they talk to, maybe family and friends? Possibly, probably. But why would we not want them to go out and share that with as many people as they possibly could? And say, well, they don't know how to answer all the questions and all the things that are going to come up yet, and that's probably true. But they knew enough to believe and to repent and to confess and be baptized, to obey the gospel. Don't we want them to share that? They could at least share that. In other words, encouraging people to go out and say, I was sick, but now I'm well. I was lost, but now I'm found. And to encourage people to go out and to plant that seed and to begin to talk to other people. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word evangelism? Door knocking. What else? Or is that the first thing that comes to your mind when you... Okay, televangelism could be because of the way that that's used, the word's used with that. Okay, usually it's door knocking or going through a series of Bible studies over multiple weeks with somebody sitting across the dining room table and just getting into their dining room to be able to sit down with them with Bibles open and talk to them, which that's all part of it. But I think we have taken this word, evangelism, it's a word that we have transliterated. It's a word that we've taken off of euangelion, the good news is part of that word, and we've transliterated it. A word that literally means to preach the good news. Well, for this man that was just healed, what was the good news? I'm not sick anymore. I don't have leprosy. And I know the man who did it. I can introduce you. I can point him out to the one who did this for me. And so the good news, that brand new Christian, that babe in Christ that just came out of the waters of baptism, what's the good news for them? I know the message of salvation. I know that I am right with God. I know that I have been cleansed and my sins have been washed clean. And so that's the good news they need to be going out and sharing. That idea of good news is, sometimes we knock on doors like door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesmen. And I'm talking about me here as well. When I've done door knocking campaigns, a lot of times you go door to door and what's that vacuum cleaner salesman do? Well, I'm from that store down the road and I've got a truck full of vacuums back here and I was wondering if you'd be interested in letting me show them to you. Okay? You want to buy one of my vacuums? You want to buy one of my vacuums? Anybody want to buy one of my vacuums? Who here doesn't have a vacuum? What do you hear when you knock on a door when you're knocking doors on a campaign? What church are you from? Oh, I've already got a church. And we go, oh, okay. And we just go on. And it's kind of that same thing. Well, I'm from the church from down the road, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in studying the Bible with me. Oh, I'm already religious. I don't need that. Oh, I don't have any need for that. And really, that's the problem. We haven't convince them that they need it yet. Talk about vacuum salesman. Buster Sides, he's a preacher in Blanchard, Oklahoma. This is 20 years ago almost. He is the most frugal. He won't spend a penny without, he won't. He frustrates me sometimes how hard he pinches his money. But this vacuum salesman, Rainbow vacuum cleaner. Anybody have a Rainbow vacuum cleaner? Anybody has had a Rainbow vacuum cleaner? Yeah, there the hand goes. You got suckered into it too. And they knock on the door, and they said, they're giving their spiel and said, hey, listen, just let me come in and clean a room. I mean, you're going to get a clean rug, if nothing else. If you don't like it, I'm gone. Just let me come in. As a matter of fact, and then he gets in there. What does he do? Tell you what, you go get your vacuum cleaner, clean it first. That sound familiar? You clean it first, and okay, you want to go over it again? Go over it again. Here, let me go over it for you with yours. We're going to get this good. And then I go over it with mine. And they have that nifty little attachment on there that has the filter in it that shows you all the dirt that they still pulled out of your carpet. What did they just do? They showed you that you have a need. They're trying to convince you that you need what I have. And the fact that he had a brand new baby crawling around on that floor didn't hurt. That there's a big need that you have to have a cleaner carpet. We had a Kirby guy come in and vacuum I don't know why, somehow he ended up in our bedroom with vacuuming our bed. And looking at what's in our bed, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm sleeping on that every night. And they're trying to create a need. If they can create a need, then they're going to be able to sell you a vacuum cleaner. Even though the vacuum cleaner costs thousands of dollars, and you maybe end up paying for it for months and months and months on some plan. And when I heard that Buster Sides bought this thousands of dollar vacuum, what in the world? It's because somebody created a need. When we are trying to reach people with the gospel, very rarely do we start with the need. People need to understand there's a need, and that's the uncomfortable part. The uncomfortable part is sin. But I can start that conversation by saying, I was unclean, but now I know I'm clean. I know that now, from what I see in God's Word, that what I have been taught and what I have done has made me right with God. And everybody needs to be made right with God. Are you sure you've been made right with God? Because sin will get in the way, and it'll keep us away from God. We have to find ways to create a need. And there's some ways, sometimes I've seen people knocking doors that they do a pretty good job of that, and some that they almost scare people away more than they are trying to show them, I want to help you. We've got to create a need so that when we talk to people, oh no, I've already got one. I've got my own church. We need to be prepared for those moments. What I've done so many times in the past is, oh, okay, well, thanks for your time. They have their own church. If it's a church that is not living by the standard of what Jesus has commanded in order to be saved and to worship Him and to live by every single day, they've still got a problem. And we need to not be so satisfied by saying, oh, okay. We need to have the same type of passion that we see this man have. This man was cleansed, and he says, I am now clean. You know that's what he was saying as he was going all over the place. Look at what it says in verse 45. But he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the news around to such an extent that Jesus could no longer publicly enter a city, but stayed out in unpopulated areas, and they were coming to him from everywhere. This is the result of this one man. It says that. It says he was spreading the news around to such an extent. One man excited about what Jesus did for him. And now Jesus can't even go into a city because there's too many people, and he has to go out into the unpopulated areas. Where was Jesus when he feeds the 5,000? He's out in the wilderness. He has to stay in those areas now because the masses of people, because one man, now I'm sure it wasn't just one man because Jesus is healing and casting out demons of a lot of people, and they're probably doing the exact same thing. They're telling everybody. And we need to help people understand the value and the importance of being cleansed by the blood of Jesus Christ, and to have that type of an excitement about who we are belonging to Jesus. All right, we'll pick up there. I think we just finished chapter 1. How about that? Yep. It is, yeah. It would be one of those places that I wouldn't look at it as being as significant, but you're right. The word make is one of our key words, and so if you want to mark it, you can mark it here, and then we'll see more of the significance of that word in other places. Good catch. Oh, by the way, this is the last Wednesday night that we'll be doing this class. Robert is going to begin, what's the next week's singing night? And then in December, Robert is going to begin teaching the Wednesday night class using some of the Winkler material in the book of Acts. And so this Mark class will be a Sunday morning class. And so it won't be both Sunday and Wednesday. So just a heads up for what's coming here in the next couple weeks.